So what does the on-chain data say around Bitcoin's recent crash? Does it indicate that we have stopped crashing? Does it indicate that we will see a turnaround very soon? In this video, we're going to look at the data provided by the Glassnode weekly newsletter. So you look at various charts from price data to on-chain data relating to coin age, realized profit loss, supply in the hands of short-term versus long-term holders, a lot of very interesting data. And so in the end, we look at this in order to get a balanced view, to gain an objective view to where we are currently standing. So let's start with simple price data. This is simply another representation of Bitcoin's price over the long term, starting from the bull market in 2017, where we then subsequently had an 80% crypto winter in 2018. And what we see here in pink is how much we have actually come down from the prior all-time high. So this crypto winter, to be very exact, was 83% in magnitude. And then if you measure the all-time high to the Corona crash, that was a 74% decline. Now we've had a few new all-time highs recently, right? This should not be a surprise. During the summer crash of last year, we went down by 54%. And currently with this new all-time high, we are down by 49.9%. So this is the very first chart on the newsletter. I personally do not really like to look at deltas from the all-time high. You can see very early videos on this channel where I tried to find out, is there maybe some kind of correlation, as in distance to the prior all-time high to the performance in the future. And I did not find such kind of correlation. So the simple fact that we went down 50% from the top does not mean that we have a higher likelihood of increasing in the future. The reason why I still include this in this video is to simply make you aware of this phenomenon. Just because we have come down does not mean we can't come down further. And what's very important here is that when we come down, say, by 50%, and when you would buy in because of that, we can still go down again by 50%, right? And then we are looking at a 75% loss. So it looks like the difference between 50% loss and 75% loss isn't that much. But 75% loss simply means doing a 50% loss 2 times in a row. So there's a pretty significant difference. Now, one chart that I do find very useful is the market value to realized value Z-Score. That's also a very popular chart on lookintobitcoin.com. So there you can see the live tracker of this indicator. And here it's also shown in this Glassnode newsletter. And it does seem like once we go below a certain threshold, we tend to have very good buying opportunities. Note though, we have to be very low on this because at the current level over here, that is indicated by this dashed black line, there's still plenty of room to fall. Look at this crash here, for example. This is when we went during this 2018 crash from 6K down to 3K. So this was a 50% crash, but the MVRV score was already lower than the current level. So this would indicate that another 50% drop from here would not be impossible, at least if we simply use this indicator without any adjustment. Now this is something very similar. This is the realized price to liveliness ratio, which basically measures at what price has a coin moved the last time. And so you've got the realized price here in blue. So when Bitcoin gets moved again from one wallet to another, you update the price of that coin. When it doesn't get moved, you simply stay at that value. And I think that's the more important of the 2 lines over here. I think we can actually ignore the orange line over here. And what we can see is when there's a lot of trading activity happening, which is typically during a bull market, this blue line tends to increase quickly, right? Because it updates very quickly. It gets close to the price. Once there's a bear market, people tend to trade less and the price somewhat gets locked in. And when we really capitulate, then the current price even goes below that realized price, meaning a lot of people during this time are in losses and they don't even consider selling. Otherwise, this blue line here would go down sharply, right? So people have completely written off their Bitcoin holdings. That's when you should buy. That's when there are the real opportunities. So we had this after this crash from 6K to 3K in 2018. We also had this here during the Corona crash. And currently this value hovers at around 24K, to be more exact, 24.2K. So if Bitcoin would ever go below that value, which it might or it might not, this would be, at least historically speaking, a very, very good buying opportunity. If this happens, I personally will get very much risk on with my crypto holdings. If you find this content so far valuable, please give this a like because it will help the channel grow. Thank you. Let's continue with the net realized profit to loss ratio. I have my doubts that this data here is really that useful because what it plots is the profit and loss in billions, so in a fixed US dollar amount. And so it does look like the Corona crash isn't actually as significant as the recent crash here during the summer of last year. But I tend to disagree. This crash here was way more massive. We lost almost 50% in Bitcoin's value on one single day. The reason why it doesn't look as significant here is simply because Bitcoin grew that much during the time. It went from 10K over here to 6K. So of course, these magnitudes here, they expand because price movements, they happen in relative terms, in percentage terms. And so I don't think it makes too much sense to draw support lines over here and derive from that we have seen the absolute bottom. This is what Glassnode tends to imply with this chart. I think this chart is way better of an indicator to see how low we really are, historically speaking, for Bitcoin. But still, since this is a metric a lot of people look at, I included it in this video. Simply don't assume just because people are in losses, we will turn around anytime soon. That doesn't have to necessarily happen. Now here are two charts that kind of split up this in two different segments. So we've got the short-term holder supply in profit loss and the long-term holder supply in profit loss. And I don't think we have to necessarily over-interpret and over-analyze these charts. But what I do think is interesting is when we look at the profits, that's in the darker of the colors, right? So this is the fraction of people, of short-term holder people that are in profits, and it fluctuates massively, right? Sometimes almost every one of the short-term speculators is in losses. Sometimes almost everybody is in profits. So we've got a lot of fluctuations here for short-term people and a lot of potential headaches. This is somewhat different for the long-term holders. I mean, look at this, right? The long-term holders, they tend to be in profit way more often. It fluctuates way less. And so the message we can get out of this is simply expanding your time horizon, simply holding Bitcoin for a longer period of time will drastically increase your probability of being in profit. It's not 100%, right? If you buy, say, half a year ago and then you get a Corona crash, of course, your likelihood of being in the losses is very high. But we don't get those kind of crashes very often. And since crypto is simply a game of odds, you want to optimize those odds and they become better and better the longer you hold the asset. That's, I think, the best way to really interpret these two charts. Let's go next to the percent of supply that hasn't been active for at least 1 year. So this is a measure of how much speculation is there currently in the market. When this orange line is very low, it means there's a lot of activity happening around crypto. When this orange line is very high, it means most of Bitcoin is currently held by long-term holders that haven't touched their Bitcoin for a long time. And what you want is, you want this orange line to be as high as possible. When it's very low, we might be heading towards a bear market, right? Because the time horizon of the participants in the market is comparatively short. But once most people are long-term holders, then you're drying up the supply, right? This is 63.4% of all of Bitcoin being held by long-term holders. And so there's simply not that much Bitcoin to go around, which then can trigger a rally. And so what's positive right now is that this is again increasing, right? So people that bought Bitcoin over here, they are not selling. They simply wait for another leg up. And so the longer this trend continues, the higher we go, the more the supply of Bitcoin dries up, which then can be a driver for another rally. But so far, we are not anywhere close to all-time highs. So the picture looks very similar to over here, right? We still have potential way to fall. Not saying this has to happen. It didn't always happen in the past, but we do have potential to further fall. And we also have potential to dry up the supply even more. We have been higher in the past, and whenever we have been high on this, the pressure on Bitcoin's price to increase is very high. If you enjoyed this content, you're probably also going to enjoy the premium membership content to be found at thebitcoinstrategy.com. There's a private chat where you can ask me any questions. There's daily market updates around Bitcoin, around Ethereum, around altcoins, and of course, exclusive content around portfolio management, around timing the market. If you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe as well because I publish videos regularly. And feel free to also check out our Telegram group. Simply search for Bitcoin strategy channel within the Telegram app. Make sure though that you don't fall for scams. There are people that impersonate me. I will never message you directly. So be careful. Don't invest into anything where somebody reached out to you that pretends to be me. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.